I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Wednesday, January the 23rd. I want to remind you guys you need to be thinking about tuning in to DV Auction the latter part of this week and over the weekend. We are going to be at Red Bluff at the big sale there at Red Bluff, California. And the Western Video Auction is going to have a sale on Thursday in conjunction with Red Bluff. They got a good offering on there. And then get on into Friday and Saturday. They have their big gelding horse sale there, and stock dog sale, and also the bull sale that they hold in Red Bluff. And that is quite an event. And if you're not going to be able to be there, like I'm not going to be able to be there, you can maybe feel like you're there. Mix yourself a cocktail and sit down at your computer and watch that, and you might can get a little bit of the essence of being in Red Bluff, California during a big Red Bluff sale. But talk about what's going on in the commercial cattle market middle of this week. Tag. And I do mean tag, and not like you're it tag, but tag that's hanging on these cattle. That's what they call the extra mud that they're carrying around. They're tagging it along with them. And it is really becoming a huge problem. It has been here for several weeks, but now it's starting to be another ploy that the packers are using to keep this market under pressure. Whenever the packers are short bought, there's been a lot of tonnage lost in these storms and in the mud that we've seen for the last several weeks. And you would think that this market would be higher, but the packers are squealing about the mud, and it does lower the yield on these cattle. They don't want to give a live bid on a lot of these cattle. It's been in the mud. Some of the packers are rating the cattle on how muddy they are, telling their buyers that they won't accept this amount of mud or that or whatever, and it's becoming a big deal. But rather than just buying those cattle dressed and boosting the market up for that, they just keep wanting to whittle down more on the live, because of course that keeps the market under pressure if you're whittling down on any price rather than moving up on your dressed. Whenever they know those cattle are gonna have a lower dressing percentage, you would think they would just try to buy more of them dressed and raise that bid to get more of them secured, but it'd rather go the other way around. You look at the board on Tuesday, February live cattle futures down $1.40. Wasn't it nice on Monday? We had Martin Luther King Jr. Day and the board wasn't down. We didn't have to be under pressure from that, but come back on a regular business day, and of course the board's down, hard to start the week. But February ended the day at 125.12. April down $1.30 at 126.07. Now I'm going to tell you something here that you may not have noticed even though you watched the board, but after April, your next highest traded month is next February 2020, and it's at 118.25. I believe there's opportunity in there. I think there's several of those months that are going to be as high as we're selling cattle right now, if not higher, and that's a lot of market that you can cash in on if anybody's got guts enough to take a long position or to buy a call there. So anyways, just keep in mind that how much pressure they've got this board under. But January feeder cattle down 40 cents at 141.05. March down 132 at 141.40 or 141.50. And if you see now, they've been so hard on that feeder cattle board here the last couple of weeks. It was running way over what your cash market is. Now, actually, on your CME cash feeder cattle index, we've got a positive basis there. Not a lot, but we do have a positive basis where as much pressure out in the field that the cash market's been under due to the weather and the mud and everything, it hasn't been as much pressure as it's been under on paper in Chicago. But your fat cattle market, like I said, under pressure. It's funny how the packers are coming out early in the week wanting cattle, but it's still a downer. And they need cattle. They've had 2 weeks of kind of a limited volume, 50,000, 60,000, when they need to be buying 80 to 100,000 or more negotiated cash, and not doing it, but coming out early this week wanting to buy cattle and talking people into buying them lower because they're muddy. But Nebraska sold around 600 head. That was confirmed on Tuesday at 123, which would be a buck lower there. Kansas sold 1,000 head string there, one lot at 122. And you think, why in the world would they take less money for cattle whenever they're short bought? We've lost all this tonnage and everything. Well, the cattle got mud on them. That's kind of a catch-22. You got cattle up in the northern plains, and not even in the northern plains, just in Kansas. It's really bad in Kansas, and I don't know if everybody realizes how terrible the lot conditions are in Kansas and the horrible weather that they've had in the Kansas feedlot areas. But you know, those cattle are carrying a lot of mud. Well, the kind of cattle they put on feed in the wintertime that far north, and especially up in the northern plains, more English type cattle, they got more hair, they gather up more mud. You go into a lot of the southern plains yards, got more crossbred type cattle, they don't have hair, they don't get along in the wintertime quite as well, but the mud doesn't stick to them near as much. It's just like so many things in the cattle business. It's a catch-22. It's you know, give and take one way or the other. But you know, why, you know, if we're talking our steady market at 124 on a normal yield here with decent lot conditions, you'd think we'd average around 63% dress. That would be 197. So that's what our market has been, 197. Well, if we start losing dressing percentage, a lot of your cattle aren't making 62% anymore. That would be 122. But at 122, at 60.5%, which is probably what some of those real dirty cattle are going to dress, because we're hearing a lot of cattle that are carrying a lot of mud on them, not even making 60%. But at that 122, say those cattle are real muddy and they only make 60.5%, that would come back over $200 dressed. Why wouldn't they just give a $1.98 or $1.99 for some cattle, and which would provoke guys to sell cattle because it's a higher market, but they just don't want to do anything to make it look positive on the market, because it affects all of your formula cattle and everything like that, and it could get this market stirring to go back up north a little bit. And once it's going south, they want to keep it under pressure, keep it going lower, 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 and everybody in the doldrums. But that's where they're at right now. But box beef cutout values, they're gaining ground on it early in the week here. Choice cutouts 216.34, up $1.08. Selects 211.78, up 86. Very narrow choice select spread at $4.62. But you know, they're getting box beef cutout values back up there. They're working the other guys on the other end, your guys that are buying that product, because the margins in some cases are getting below $100 a head. That scares them to death. You know, if we had had a margin like this in the cattle feeding industry this long, guys wouldn't know how to handle it, because it's just been so profitable for these packers. They've just been gangbusters, making so much money right in the face of cattle feeders losing a lot of money, miserable, balking in the mud, you know, struggling every single day. And then when they're down, that's when they like to kick them down and put their foot on their head and don't let them up for air. But slaughter is running pretty heavy. They've got to have some cattle somewhere, guys, and they need the cattle. You got to take advantage of it whenever they do it, because I guarantee you they'll take advantage of you. But it's running 37,000 just through Tuesday, higher than the same week a year ago. Let's look at your feeder cattle markets. Real-time index on Cattle Market Central, 140.40, and it's back down a little bit. Monday we actually had an up day in there, an uptick, first one we've had really since the beginning of the trade this year, but back under pressure a little bit, and starting to see it. Monday's up had more to do with the light offerings we had in some of our high volume sales, like Oklahoma National Stockyards, Joplin, places like that. Didn't have that big a run. They had bigger runs like in Russell, Iowa, and up north. But it was more balanced on Tuesday. That's why we saw it. It's back fading a little bit. And at OKC West in El Reno, had a light calf run 2,000 head only. Had a light test there, steady to $2 higher. And then most of your lighter calves there, not your bigger feeding calves so much. And the demand remains good for stocker calves, even though it's cold and wintry and muddy and nasty. They know there's going to be a big rush on them whenever it gets closer to spring, and still a lot of grazing outfits wanting to buy stocker calves. But Winter Livestock in La Junta, Colorado had a good run. 3,100 head, which is pretty impressive after that monster sale they had last week at the Stock Show Special, which was nearly 7,000 head. So had a good test from a week ago and had a pretty decent run this week, but it's just kind of what we've been seeing this week. Lighter calves selling better, heavier calves a little bit lower, but steers under 500 and heifers under 700 selling steady to $2 higher. Spots as much as $8 higher on those stocker heifer calves, but the heavier weight steers over 5 and heifers over 7 steady to $2 lower. Look at a big sale. Philip the Giant, you can watch here on DV Auction every time they have a sale on Tuesday. 6,100 head. When I pulled this market here to start putting this report together, they were still selling cattle there. It was the only report available, of course, on Cattle Market Central, but had a good test at the time I pulled it, over 6,000 head. And you can go into Cattle Market Central and pull reports in the middle of the day, guys, and see what's sold so far. You don't have to wait till somebody puts a report out. But look at this report that I pulled on Cattle Market Central. Look at your popular tested weights of steers. 962 head of 6-weight steers, average 660 pounds at 153.11. Almost 1,400 head of 7-weight steers. Some of them beat calfy, some of them, depending on the environment they grew up in, would have a yearling look to them, but about a year old there, weighing 742 pounds on the average and averaging 144.85. That's a very impressive market there. 876 head of 8-weight feeder steers, average 848 at 142.22. And you know, you get down below I-70, you don't see hardly any feeding type cattle that are bringing in the 140s. Mostly, especially on the average, they're all bringing in the 130s. But you get up in the northern plains, you got more farmer feeder demand. Actually, they've had a real good winter. As miserable as the winter's been in Kansas and the southern part of Nebraska and Iowa, it's pretty darn nice when you get up in the Dakotas, Montana, places like that. They've had a mild winter because of the El Nino. All the storms have been kind of going right through the central part of the United States. Talk about a good sale at Alma, Nebraska. Another DV auction customer there, and one big consignment of cattle there. The Kalk brothers and Terry, my buddy, he sent me some information on these. Look at these cattle before he sent them into the sale there, which he also runs. You talk about all black, pretty clean and top quality kind of cattle there, with a fair weigh up and good condition there. But 201 head of them. Here's one cut of them there that they weighed up, but they sold them all together. But 201 head of them averaged 827 pounds at $141. And that's a pretty impressive market there on a big, nice string of cattle at Alma Livestock Auction in Alma, Nebraska. Look at an individual quote from Fredonia, Kansas there. 66 head of 802-pound steers in Fredonia, Kansas bring 143. And that's your feeder flash for Wednesday.